auction and purchasing auction. So what's the difference and what are the things you need to look out for? Because not every auction lot is built in the same way. There are some similarities to auctions, but there are also many differences. So in this video, I'm going to talk about some of the things you really need to be aware of when you're buying in auctions. So let's start with the types of auctions. There's a few different types of auctions. You've got one, the traditional auction house, where you would typically, before COVID, you'll turn up to a big room in a hotel. There'll be hundreds of people there, lots of properties being sold. There'll be a magazine that they've produced, and they would have been marketing these products or these properties for the last few months on Rightmove, Zoopla, and get people interested. And the idea is to then shepherd people into a room, and then on that day, people will either put proxy bid, so they ring in advance, register in advance, and put a proxy bid that they can say, I want to buy lot number 34, and the maximum I want to pay is 250,000. And then on the day, that proxy bid will be used during the actual lot sale. So that's the proxy in the main room. Then you've got people who actually turn up to the actual auction and register beforehand, give your ID and some kind of bank details, and then you get a little kind of like a what they call spade, they call it, with a number in it. So the idea is when you're bidding, you're lifting your little spade, your little sign, and once you win, you can actually then they'll come and say to you, number 74 was your spade number, and then they'll come and register you as the purchaser of the lot. During that process, you would have been bidding against other people in the room. Sometimes there are, the auctioneers use their skills to, bid off the wall, get you to, ultimately they're working on behalf of the sellers. So their aim is to get the sale as high as possible. So that's still in the traditional room setting that happens. And then the idea is once you've won a lot, you then go into the next room and sign all the legals. When this is happening, the minute that the gavel falls, so the auctioneer hits the table and say, right, sold to number 57, which is you, that means at that moment in time, you've actually exchanged contract on that property, which means that you can no longer back out, or if you do, you'll have to pay fees and lose your deposit, and the seller also can't back out. So it's guaranteed that you're bought and they've sold. And then the idea is, depending on what the terms and conditions of that lot was, you generally get 20 working days, so roughly it's about a month worth of time from the time that you exchange on that day and you complete. So you have to pay the whole amount by that time. So typically that's what happens in a room setting called what normally would have been auction in a big kind of room. Now, those things are few and far between since COVID. So I have realized that actually online, I can still sell just as many properties online. And guess what? As an auctioneer, I don't have to rent that hotel. I don't have to pay all these extra additional costs that comes with hosting these events. Print hundreds and thousands of magazines. Everything can now be digitalized. So a lot of the big companies have also migrated during COVID. During COVID, I bought at least half a dozen of properties in online auctions, and they've got better at doing viewings. They do video walk through the properties, and the idea is that they'll flag up any issues that is with that property. So I've bought many a property during COVID the last 2 years or so through this mechanism of online auctions. So it's still the big auction companies, but now using an online platform of theirs to sell those products. Same principle applies. Okay, you replace the room in you staying at home, but the basis of sale stays the same. So once you are digitally clicking and you will have registered, everything's exactly the same way, registered beforehand and put a deposit down for each of the lot that you need. You've read all the legal packs. You are sure that what you're buying, you know what you're buying. And then you come to the day, to the minute that it's happening, you will then click the buttons and put your bids up until you eventually, hopefully, win the lot. So once you win the lot, the same principle applies. You have exchanged contract on that lot at that time. So you are bound to buy, they're bound to sell, and then you get the same kind of 20 working days or 28 days. Now, those working days to complete is that can change. I've bought something that you had to complete in 10 days time. So don't take it from this video. And again, it's a good time to say this is not advice. This is my experience that I'm sharing here. So please do your own research, get your own legal teams to have a look at the legal packs. But in those legal packs, you've got to make sure that you read some of the key details, one of which is how long you've got before you have to complete. Like I said, the typical is 28 days. During COVID, that went up to 8 weeks, so 2 months worth of time to complete. But I've also, like I said, completed within 10 working days, so it's about 2 weeks. So depending on what you're buying, please read the legal pack. That's your core piece of information that you've got to do, whether it's a virtual auction, whether it's a physical auction. And the third one, I'm going to talk about the modern day auction as well. So sticking with virtual auctions, the next thing you need to know about these auctions is once you've bid, you've registered, you've bid, you've won, you have left the deposit, and then literally within a few minutes somebody will ring you, say, okay, well, you've won the bid now, you need to pay the rest of the deposit. Typically it's 10% on deposit on exchange. So yesterday I bought a house online through a virtual auction, and I was asked to leave £5,000 deposit to begin with before I even bid, to allow me to bid. Then during the auctions and after that, I won the auction. And won is an interesting word. You've not won anything, you've just bought it. So anyway, so I won the auction, and then within 2 or 3 minutes later they rang me and said, okay, right, so 10% deposit, there's a deficit of about £22,000 or whatever it was. You've got to pay that. So be prepared to then pay that on whether it's backs or on the card. Typically the big companies don't take card payment. They will do, especially if it's virtual, they will do backs payment. So once you've paid that, you have now considered that you've exchanged on the house. And in my case, for this house yesterday, it's a 20 working day completion, and so we will complete in 4 weeks from now. Now, the other thing to bring up here is the cost. So in auctions, typically, I would say, in my experience, maybe 70% of the time, the seller will pay their own auction fees. So when we sell the house, the auctioneers say, okay, you owe the auction house £5,000, for example. So the seller tends to pay that. And then the buyer will also have to pay a fee to buy at auction. So typically about 1,500 quid. So in this scenario, 5,000 for the seller, 1,500 quid for the buyer. In my case yesterday, I mean, I was aware of it because obviously I'd read the legal pack. The seller, it was a probate, been going on for, I think, 10 years or something like that, finding people. It was an unregistered land, etc., etc. So in my case, yesterday, the seller had asked for the seller's cost, so the £5,000, as well as the buyer's cost, well, which I have to pay anyway, to be passed on to the buyer. So in my case, I had to pay £5,000 auctioneer fees that the seller would have had to pay, as well as 1,500 quid, I think, towards their legal pack that they had to pay. So 6.5 grand I had to pay, plus on top of that, I have to pay my own auction fees, which is about 2 grand or so. So be aware, that's quite a substantial amount of money. So it's almost £10,000 worth of fees. If you weren't aware that you had to pay the seller's fees, you might have been stung for something quite a lot more than what you were expecting to pay for the house. So there are a lot of hidden costs that people put in. So please read the legal pack. And under the legal pack, the first thing you start with, that I start with, is the special conditions of sale. And that special condition sale basically outlines all of the key features of that property and the sale and the terms and conditions. So make sure you read that and then get prepared. Please seek advice, get a solicitor to have a look at your legal pack. I tend to do that if I'm struggling with some commercial stuff unit into it. I will get my 2 or 3 of my solicitors to have a look at them. But get advice is my best advice. And then after that, we will talk about financing in the next video around how you finance property purchases in auctions. I hope that helps. Follow me on all the social media. Have a look at my links. I've written 2 books on property investment. I also offer one-to-one coaching, so DM me to either get onto my 6-week course or book in and ask the expert for an hour with me. My name is Azid Ganga, and I'll speak to you at the next video.